Aloha class, I wanted to do a video on 10-1 and then I'll go into 10-2. So for chapter 10, we're talking about differential analysis, the key to decision making. And so for this problem, we're going to identify relevant and irrelevant costs and benefits in a decision. So a relevant cost is a cost that differs between alternatives, so it's different between your two choices, and a relevant benefit is a benefit that differs between alternatives. So it's different, it's not the same, or it doesn't remain constant between the two choices. And so an avoidable cost is a cost that can be eliminated in whole or in part by choosing one alternative over another. So if you can avoid the cost, it's going to be relevant. If you can't avoid it, if it's unavoidable in both situations, then it's not going to be relevant. And so some of the costs that are irrelevant or never relevant are sunk costs and a future cost that does not differ between the alternatives. So the example is that you are going to watch a movie on Friday night. Okay, well, you've decided that you're going to order pizza no matter what, even if you go out or stay in. The pizza would be irrelevant because you're going to pay for the pizza and that's what you've decided to eat for dinner. But if you're going to go out and watch a movie at a movie theater, probably not super likely right now, or stay in, so the cost of renting a movie at home could be something around $4 while going, or $6 or $7, while going out might be around $20. So there's different costs, right? So if you don't go out, you could avoid that $20 cost, or if you don't stay home, you could avoid the $4 to $7 cost, and there's a difference between those two. But the pizza is a future cost, and it's not going to differ between alternatives. So that would not be relevant because you're going to eat pizza, for example. And so keys to successful decision making focus on the relevant costs. So sometimes managers can really get bogged down in all of the costs. So we want to eliminate everything that's not relevant. So if it doesn't differ between the two options, we're going to count it out. If it's sunk, we're not going to count it as well in our decision. And so just depending on the context, some costs can be relevant to a specific decision, like we'll see in case 1, and then in case 2, they might not be relevant anymore. So just depending on the context, some are going to be relevant and some are not going to be relevant. And so, for example, in the example given in these slides and also in the textbook, it talks about the cost of the car and if you should drive or you should take the train, or if you should drive or you should take the bike, right? So the cost of the car initially buying it is a sunk cost, and that wouldn't be relevant. But if you're going to drive, the gasoline is definitely a cost, and that would be relevant. So irrelevant and relevant. Okay, so now we have a basis for relevant and irrelevant. So I'm going to do 10-1, and I'll go to the problem. Identifying relevant costs. A number of costs are listed below that may be relevant in a decision faced by management of Span, a Swedish Span AB, a Swedish manufacturer of sailing yachts. So copy the information, and then we're going to read case 1 and case 2. So let's focus on case 1. The company chronically has no idle capacity, and the old model B100 machine is the company's constraint. Management's considering a model B300 machine in addition to the company's present model B100 machine. So they're not getting rid of B100. It's working at capacity, but it's a constraint or a bottleneck, so we need more capacity. So we're going to buy another machine. The old model B100 machine will continue to be used at capacity as before, with the model B300 machine being used to expand production. This will increase the company's production and sales. The increase in volume will be large enough to require increase in fixed selling expenses and in general administrative overhead, but not in fixed manufacturing overhead. So fixed manufacturing overhead is going to stay constant between buying the Model 300 and not buying it. So that's not going to be relevant because it's the same in both scenarios. So fixed manufacturing overhead is not going to affect us. And I'm going to go down to where I wrote down all of the questions. So we're just going to say relevant or not relevant. So we said that fixed manufacturing overhead is not going to be relevant. I'm going to put an X in not relevant because it's not going to be affected, right? So it said increase in volume will require increase in fixed selling expenses and in fixed admin overhead, but not in fixed manufacturing overhead. So not fixed manufacturing overhead. Okay, I have this, but it did say in general administrative overhead and in fixed selling expenses as well. Okay, but they said that they're going to increase sales. So is the sales revenue going to be relevant Well, if you're going to be producing more, you're going to be selling more, and you bought that machine, and that's going to be a difference between not buying it and buying it. You're going to have more a benefit to it, and so this is going to be relevant to our situation because you're selling more and you're going to make more sales revenue. If you're going to be selling more, you're going to have more cost of your product because you're going to have more products sold. And so definitely direct materials, it's a variable cost. The more you sell, the more cost you're going to have. And it's so just thinking about an increase in production will also increase your cost if it's a variable cost. Direct labor is variable, relevant as we sell more. Variable manufacturing overhead, relevant. And so we're not going to sell this B100 model. Depreciation is sunk cost. You've already expensed that part, right? So systematic expensing of your asset over time. So that's not in play. We're not selling this machine. So that's not going to be relevant because we just want to buy the new machine. And then you're going to buy you want to buy the new machine. So that is relevant because that's going to cost you money. And our variable is also going to stay with these variable manufacturing overhead, variable selling expense. So if it's variable, it follows the number of units sold. The more you sell, the more you're going to incur that cost with the variable selling. So that will be relevant. So all of your variables, all of your sales revenue are going to be relevant. The cost of the new machine is relevant. And then they said specifically that it would affect the fixed selling expense and the general admin overhead. So they did say that, and that's why it would be relevant. Let's go on to case number 2. The old model B100 machine is not the company's constraint, but management is considering replacing it. So we're going to get rid of it and get the new model machine because of the potential savings in direct materials with the new machine. The B100 model would be sold. The change will have no effect on production or sales. So we're going to say exactly the same except for that direct materials. There would be a potential savings. This change will have no effect on production or sales other than some savings in direct materials cost due to less waste. So they said it's not going to affect your sales, right? But the direct materials it is going to affect. So it's not going to affect your sales. It's going to stay exactly the same. You're just going to get a new machine. Depreciation, sunk cost, like we saw previously, if it's going to be depreciation, it's just systematic expensing over time. So you've already taken that depreciation, it's sunk. The book value, so this would be what you paid for it originally. Your original paying for that machine B100 would be irrelevant as well. So you paid a certain amount that was in the past, and it's irrelevant for future decision making, those sunk costs. Disposable value, though, you are going to sell it, and it does have value, so you want to know how much you can sell it for. So your disposable value, you are going to need to know because you're going to get rid of it and buy the new machine. So those costs are in play and are relevant. Fixed manufacturing overhead general, I don't think they said anything specific about fixed manufacturing overhead. Everything should stay the same. So these aren't going to be relevant if they're staying exactly the same. So just to recap, hopefully this was okay. So if you're going to change the sales, everything, including the sales revenue and all of the variable costs, will be relevant. And then they said specifically that these ones would be affected, the fixed selling expense and general admin overhead for case 1. Case 2, there was going to be a cost savings with direct material, and then we are not worried about depreciation. It's already a sunk cost. Book value, already paid that, that's a sunk cost. And so now what you're going to sell it at, disposable value, is relevant. We're going to get rid of it and then buy the new machine. So this is it for 10-1.